On this episode of the Best of the OurView Podcast, I present to you my conversation with Wesley Hamilton. Wesley has used his disability to turn it into something positive for himself and for his surrounding communities. And I really enjoyed this conversation with him. I hope that you're able to get something out of this conversation. Don't forget to listen to the full episode on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Just search for the OurView Podcast on all of those platforms. Leave us a comment here on Instagram and let us know what you enjoyed about the conversation. Always start off my episodes by asking my guests to introduce themselves, just because I know for me, there's a lot more to me besides my disability.
Yeah.
So, I always like to, let my guests introduce themselves so you can share what you would like about who you are as Wesley Hamilton.
My name is Wesley Hamilton. I am the executive director of a local Kansas City nonprofit by the name of Disabled But Not Really. I am also an adaptive athlete, speaker, model, influencer, advocate. And then I like to end it with, I really don't care about none of those titles because I'm more than that. I'm just Wesley Hamilton. 8.5 years ago, I was shot multiple times, which caused me to have a spinal cord injury. My gunshot wounds were in my abdomen. And so that's where I sustained my injury. My level of injury is a T11, T12 incomplete spinal cord injury. And yeah, I know I just kind of surfaced that, but going in depth, it was a verbal altercation that led to a misunderstanding, which eventually put me in this position, for the rest of my life. I think we do surface those stories a lot. But for people to understand, especially what representation means and for our community, I will go in depth. I always tell people that, for my whole life, I never really visualized myself being disabled because I wasn't born disabled. So, at the age of 24, I'm just going over to an ex-girlfriend's house to talk about a personal situation. It became an engagement that, led to a verbal altercation. This altercation, honestly, be real with you, man, she was going in the house with another dude, bro. I'll be honest. Look, and at that time, I never knew what my emotions was or how I felt, what love was or anything, but I was hurt, even though we had ended it several weeks before, I was hurt. And so I always say my actions and emotions played a lot in that moment of what caused me to be paralyzed, because I could have left when I visualized them going into the house, instead 30 minutes later, they're waiting on, me to be rushed to the hospital. So within that time of bad choices, and the mindset that I had. So again, I grew up in the inner city, Kansas City, Missouri. And I was in the streets. That was my directive. That was what I knew. That's what I was around. So I became a product of my environment. And so my mindset was not of growth. It was not of reacting different. It was reacting, off of instinct. And so for me, I had a lot of ego and pride of just who I was and where I come from and living that lifestyle. I think having that negative mindset really captivates in situations, right? It makes you really feel like you got this rage or this fire that you gotta keep that flame. And so that I remember that day of just being that. I wanted that flame because I was hurt, but I didn't want to be weak in that moment, and honestly, the weakness was what led to me being in this position. But at that moment, I didn't realize it. So yeah, after the altercation, I honestly thought the situation was done, man. And I started walking back to my car. And that's when I was shot. So I didn't see the man that shot me. The man that actually shot me, I never seen him a day in my life, actually. But I made that environment and that energy so hostile that the person that was inside the house actually called someone over. And so that was how that all transpired. Because it never went man to man, argument. It was a lot of just eyes and probably a lot of intimidation. Um, and
Mhm.
and and again, misunderstanding. They thought I had a gun, so of course, for me living that lifestyle, I normally would have had a gun, but I just went grocery shopping, and it was my birthday weekend, so I was trying to be on something different. But I called someone over that did have one, because I wanted to feel protected. So at first feel like I sugarcoated, but I wanted to go in depth because a lot of that speaks on like my accountability and my growth now. But really want to give people the awareness of like that mindset that you have when you've never seen more of opportunities or anything like that. So yeah, but that's what led me to having this T11, T12 spinal cord injury, which, I'm very humbled about.
Something else you mentioned was, that you said something to the effect of you didn't see yourself as being disabled because you weren't born with the disability. That's really, it's really interesting because even though I was born with a disability, the people I surrounded myself with, my family and my friends, they never really made me feel like I had a disability. They made me see that I had to do things differently. Uh, but I still had to do chores around the house and all of that kind of stuff. So I never really identified as one as having a disability. And then, uh, at 10 or 11 years old, my parents decided to send me to a camp for people with disabilities. And I was like the next day calling them, like, come and get me. I want to go home. because
Oh,
to
really?
yeah, because to me, I was like, I don't have a disability. Like
Yeah,
these
yeah,
other children here, they need a place like this, but it's not for me.
no,
And it
yeah.
was a 2-week camp. And they made me stay for a week before they came and got me.
Oh man, you was still ready to go. You're
Right.
still ready.
They said, "Well, stay for a week, and if you're ready to go, then we'll come and get you." I said, "I'm sure I will be ready to go because this is not, it's not for me." So it's
Um,
interesting, how you said that because you weren't born with a disability, you didn't feel as though you were disabled.
well, and then to add to that, you know, um, especially now as being an advocate for the disabled community, growing up, especially elementary school and uh, any grade school, the kids that had disabilities were separated from the class. So
Right.
you always knew there was something different.
Hmm.
Visually as a kid, I think that's always, in part of my advocacy, I see that as an issue. I do see it should be all, I do see more improvement of putting people in classrooms and making it more inclusive. But when I was growing up, it was never seen. So I remember, um, I just remember even being told that I was this, paralyzed. Like it was unreal. Like that
Hmm.
wasn't something I could believe because I could never visualize myself being in a position of a limitation because when I grew up, they always made it seem like it was something wrong. So mentally for me, I was already going in thinking there was a problem. You
Right.
see, and it wasn't like everyone made it normal and like, oh no, it's okay. Like, no, they separated everybody. You had to keep looking straight. You couldn't ask questions. Like, honestly, we should have asked questions, but at that time, it was like, oh, don't do this, don't do that. You know how the stigmas go,
Hmm.
and so finding out that I was paralyzed really shifted, everything into like that depression stage and all because I couldn't accept it. But I will say, because I speak about it a lot, I believe that I was mentally disabled before I became physically, meaning the growth and the mindset that I have today, I would have never acquired if I didn't become paralyzed because of being a product of my environment only allowed me the limitations that system had designed for me to acquire. Like
Right.
and from knowledge and things I would have really had to step out my box and get to those things to seek that growth, but none of that was available or seen or having that representation in those communities to see it. So when I got in this position and you see who I am today and what I'm doing, man, I'm grateful for being in this position because it woke me up.
You can listen or watch the rest of this episode in its entirety by subscribing to the OurView Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Just search for the OurView Podcast on all platforms.